Well, Bob, thank you for joining me for a hands-free conversation, as I just said. Bob, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. I'm Bob Galhotra. Most lawyers in Cook County know me as Bob Galhotra. My name is Kulmeet Galhotra. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 33 years in Illinois, 30 years of which was as an assistant public defender in Cook County. I was a supervisor for the last 7 years of my career in the homicide task force. And I teach at Chicago Kent College of Law as an adjunct professor. I teach trial advocacy and criminal procedure. So lately, I have, when I left the public defender's office after 30 years, I opened up a private practice. And now my practice deals with obviously cases other than homicide, although I do handle homicide cases. And I'm most interested these days in doing uh, defense and narcotics prosecutions, as well as, I couldn't believe it, cannabis prosecutions. Because one of the first cases I got in private practice was a young man who was going back to college downstate Illinois and got pulled over, not pulled over, but got they put some drug dogs on his car when he stopped at a rest stop. And just on the basis of that drug smell, they popped his trunk and they searched his car, and they found about 120 grams of marijuana. And they wound up charging him with a class 3 felony that carried 2 to 5 in prison. And it would be a felony conviction on your record, which, when you're a student, if you're getting student loans, they'll disqualify you. So it was a pretty big deal for what I would think many recreational users would think is not a lot of marijuana.
Right, right. That's, in my book, that's not a lot at all.
Yeah. And, this was a downstate prosecutor. They weren't backing off. And, we presented several motions saying that, hey, weed's legal. So what's the big deal if my car smells like weed? And the judge, his ruling was that, well, that's enough for probable cause, because if a dog can smell it, then obviously it's not in an odor-proof container. And the vehicle code requires vehicles, if they're transporting cannabis, to have them in an odor-proof container. So, last year I worked with the Illinois State Bar Association and some members of the General Assembly to try to modify the law a little bit, and it basically choked in May and it didn't go through. There are a couple of proposals. And the other proposal was, hey, if you're going to have a guy with 110 grams of weed, why are you charging with over 100 grams when 30 grams he should be allowed to carry legally? So why won't you subtract that from 110? So there was also a proposal to modify the law so that if you're carrying a legal amount, at least subtract that. Because in my client's case, they made the difference between a class 3 felony that was not expungible and a class 4 felony that was, which is ultimately what the prosecutors came down to. So, at this time in Illinois, there is a split among the districts as to whether or not the smell of marijuana still constitutes probable cause for a search of a vehicle. And in the 4th district, which includes the district that I was in, essentially downstate and along the Mississippi River, the judges don't play. And in Will County, which is now the 2nd district, which includes Lake County, there are a couple of opinions stribbling among them saying the smell of marijuana, whether it's burnt or unburnt, is not probable cause in Illinois anymore without more.
Right.
And, in Cook County, you got judges who will deny these motions, and you'll have judges that will grant the motions. So they're real. And the case, of course, as the 2 cases from those 2 different districts have been combined and are before the Illinois Supreme Court, and a decision is not out yet. So that's still an open question in Illinois in some districts about whether or not the smell of weed is enough to search your car.
Wow. And can I ask really quick, I want to get back to the topic of possession limits, which you brought up, but are you aware of any such thing as an odor-proof container?
No, I mean my research has shown that it's basically impossible, especially if you have a dog that has a nose that's probably 10,000 times more sensitive than a human nose, or at least 1,000 times more sensitive.
Well,
So
and
what to you and I is odor-proof is not odor-proof to a dog. Not to mention, just transfer smells on objects that they can pick up.
right. That's another really good point is transfer smell. You don't even have to have it on you, but the smell alone. The reason I ask that is because there's a reason we use canines at the border, right? For just to throw out an easy example, the cartel hasn't figured out odor-proof devices. They've been trying, mixing it with coffee, mixing it with this, that. And it's like, so how is a citizen supposed to come up with this odor-proof
Absolutely. And
right?
so that was one of the proposals. There were a couple of Senate bills pending, which in their own way removed the odor proof language. But
Mhm.
at the end, they were not able to pass any of those bills. They may come up in the fall veto session, but that's still a ways away.
And can I make a quick point? I've spoken to an attorney about this. The big issue with odor is that it not only is used as probable cause, which arguably violates your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, but it is a crime. It's literally a crime. Like you can get a citation if an officer claims they smell cannabis, and it's a Class C misdemeanor, I think, or Class A misdemeanor. I don't know. It's on Illinois' website though.
Well,
And that
I'm not familiar if there's a state law on it, but the Cannabis Control Act does prohibit consumption in certain areas. And it talks about public areas. You're not really allowed to walk around smoking weed in Illinois. That's really not sanctioned under the
right,
law.
right.
And
Let me hear all.
it really ultimately comes down to the local law enforcement and to what extent this is a priority for them. And obviously, in sleepy towns, it's a priority because it brings in money for those towns, and it brings in a source of, I mean, don't forget, you might get busted for weed and beat your case, but then they may have a forfeiture action on your car.
Right.
So there's all sort, and then the forfeiture money goes to, believe it or not, the state police,
Wow.
right? So I mean, these are the dudes that are pulling people over on the highway, for various and sundry reasons, and having dogs search cars, and frequently they'll hit the jackpot, especially if you've got cars with license plates from neighboring states where cannabis is not legal,
Right.
Ohio,
And
places like
also,
that.
the way an attorney laid it out for me is like if a cop asks you in this state, do you have cannabis on you? Most people may say yes because they figure it's legal. But then the cop says, well, I thought I smelled something. That's an issue. You know what I mean? And it's just like, but to
Right,
quickly,
because the vehicle code requires it to be in an odor-proof container. So
right.
that's a Class A misdemeanor.
I was just about to say, I was reading on the state of Illinois website here. It is a Class A misdemeanor, they say. Oh, yep, Class A misdemeanor to transport cannabis in any other type of container, which of course we're not aware of an odor-proof container. So I guess it's just a Class A
Yeah,
misdemeanor
yeah.
to transport cannabis.
My claim is, hey, law enforcement, have you ever walked into a dispensary? I mean, they're not
Thank
bagging
you.
stuff up there. It's all packaged and it reeks of weed, dude. So I mean, how is it odor proof?
Right. That, in other words, to cap off your point, that means the moment you leave the dispensary, you're out of compliance with the law. Well, hold on a second. I just purchased this legally. How is
Right.
that possible? So thank you for talking on that. To wrap up, because I know you said you're short on time. Why are there still penalties for possession of cannabis? I'm not aware of the same thing for any other substance that is quote unquote legal in our society.
Yeah, well, that's because there's a huge incentive for the state government to get tax revenue. And if possession of marijuana were completely sanctioned and not made illegal for amounts over 30 grams, then you just have a bunch of people selling weed. You'd have a larger black market, in my opinion. So this is their way to sort of control their golden egg now that they've created in order to get tax money.
And what do you think about I think you're absolutely dead on target. I've heard other people guess that as well. To your point, what do you think about the fact that some of these cannabis companies that are licensed in the state of Illinois have arguably towed the line? In other words, they've taken the same approach. I've even seen in the last year, they launched a buy legal campaign. So in other words, it seems like they are almost arguing against further decriminalization of cannabis, and in some ways even arguing for the criminalization of cannabis. What do you, is it
Well,
similar?
look,
Is it similar,
I
like
mean,
you said, to protecting profits? Like you said, the state wants to protect their taxes. Maybe these
absolutely.
companies want to protect profits.
Absolutely. I mean, these are money making industries. And I mean, I don't want to, play the violin for, Cresco or any large company that, that's in that kind of business. But there's a reason why Illinois has among maybe the highest priced cannabis recreationally in the country. And it's not just the taxes. I mean, there's a pretty large profit margin too.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you, just to end our conversation, what do you mean not just the taxes? Are you saying like
Meaning
maybe
there's still a healthy profit motive for cannabis growers to charge a good price and to encourage only consumption of their own product in their own stores, and not, of course, through the black market. But if possession of marijuana were completely legal, and your neighbor, could have 3-4 pounds at his house, why wouldn't you go over and buy it from your neighbor than going to Cresco?
true. Well, and I'm
So
just your
so
personal
that's why
opinion.
they don't. That's why they still maintain these penalties for more than 30 grams if you're over 21 and a resident of Illinois. I mean, it's all about maintaining their profits and maintaining their source of revenue from taxes.
Yeah, and I'm just asking your personal opinion as someone who's had to defend against the continued criminalization of cannabis. Do you think that some of those companies should kind of be at the front of the line? Like, in other words, it's kind of hypocritical to sell weed, but then like try to not let other people sell weed or jail people for selling weed. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying?
mean, it's a interesting ethical question for them, but far be it for me to resolve that ethical question. I
Yeah.
mean, this is America; it's a capitalist society, and of course, we've got to some extent a new generation that really questions some of that too. Like we're talking about, the whole idea of equity, on so many different levels.
Mhm.
So yeah, we've got our new generations are really questioning whether or not this whole capitalist mentality is good for all.
Yeah. Well, Bob, you asked me for 10 minutes. I'm afraid I pushed it far past that. I look forward to connecting with you again in the future. Any last thoughts before we part on these topics we've discussed?
No, I mean, I'm really excited about this thing coming up at Cresco. So if you guys can come out, that would be great. August 17th. And I'll be happy to share everything I know about this area, and give you guys a few tips out there also on how to stay in compliance.
Yep, folks, it's very important you know your rights. So, August 17th, the Cannabis Consumer Council is presenting Possessing and Transporting Cannabis Legally in Illinois, and it is presented by yours truly, um, Bob, who joined us today. Again, it's on August 17th. We'll have a link so that you can purchase your tickets. It's a really fair price, and it's a really good thing to know. So, folks, I encourage you to attend this event. Bob, thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks. See you guys soon. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.